Stonehenge, England's most mysterious ancient monument. On a site older than the pyramids of ancient Egypt, 85 massive stones, some weighing more than 40 tons, stand guard on a remote and windswept plain. Why is it here? What is it for? How was it built? The answers are lost in the mists of time. Myth links Stonehenge to England's mysterious Druids, Celtic priests who are said to have practiced ritual sacrifices. This programme asks, who built Stonehenge? And unmasks the face of a man who may have helped build this astonishing ancient monument. Forget towering skyscrapers or the engineering achievements of the world's modern cities. This construction job was really tough. No cranes, no hoists, no machinery. Just massive rocks, some heavier than a fully laden 18-wheel truck. A structure so old that the rocks could only have been heaved into place by sheer muscle power alone. Still standing thousands of years later, dramatic and alluring, Stonehenge dominates Salisbury Plain in the south of England. It has fascinated people since before recorded history and still captures imaginations today. Amazingly, unlike most ancient ruins, this is not a complete ruin. Today, it remains more or less how its architects wanted it to be. Very open plan, great ventilation, but a strong and ultimately long-lasting construction. Perhaps unsurprisingly, no one knows what such a design might have been for. It's not recognizable as a church, or a temple, or a long-abandoned building. It just sits there, in massive ancient splendor, being Stonehenge. One thing it has done, over thousands and thousands of years, is fascinate all those who come here.
To think the people that built this did all that they did to build it, it's tremendous.
I mean, just look at it. It's unbelievable. It's a magical place.
In the public mind, Stonehenge has long been associated with one mysterious peoples, the Druids. The Druids were known as wise men, teachers and religious priests for the Celtic peoples ruling much of northern Europe more than 2,000 years ago. They believed in the immortality of the soul, sometimes making human sacrifices to aid Celtic warriors in battle or as a ritual to cure the gravely ill. Those claiming to follow the ancient Druid ways still meet here at summer solstice on the 21st of June, the longest day of the year when the sun rises directly into the heart of the circle. The monument's central axis aligns closely with the midsummer sunrise. Nowadays, these summer solstice celebrations turn into lengthy public parties. But in times past, long before the birth of Christ, these stones have probably witnessed real Druid ceremonies. Bodies have been found in this area, not the victims of Druid sacrifice, but human remains more than 4,000 years old. Could such bodies help solve the age-old mystery of who erected these stones? It is a structure that lies at the heart of an area of England, steeped in monuments to now long-forgotten pagan religions. In this mystical heartland of England, there seems to be an ancient association with circles. Mounds that are circular, circles of rock, and circular shapes from our distant past. And even today, mysterious links seem to flourish. The area is famous for crop circles, incredibly complex patterns appearing literally overnight in cornfields. People marvel at huge crop circles, made in the dead of night by a secret network of hoaxers, though some still credit their creation to alien visitors. And yet, however intricate and huge the crop circle designs become, none can rival the mysteries of Stonehenge. The design evolved over many generations. The first stage of construction consisted of a circular ditch and bank. Then a second phase consisting of timber structures. The third phase saw the arrival of stones, some of which were repositioned over the years. The largest stones are 23 feet tall and weigh more than 44 tons. That's the same as 6 double-decker buses. In total, more than 1,500 tons of rock, the weight of 10 steam locomotives. Perhaps most amazing of all is the precision with which it's been built. Some believe that the massive stones have been carefully aligned with stars in the heavens. At some stage in its creation, the circle of upright stones was topped by huge carved rock lintels. These huge lintel stones are nearly perfectly level, despite being built on sloping ground. Within this sits a circular arrangement of smaller uprights known as bluestones. And in the middle is a horseshoe of the largest stones of all, a series of 3-slab constructions known as the trilithons. Stonehenge is unique. Nothing quite like it has been built before or since. But the question remains, who built it? There are a lot of likely suspects. The first humans in Britain at the end of the last ice age were primitive Stone Age hunter-gatherers. Then came waves of invaders and settlers from Europe and the ancient world. Druids, Celtic priests, were preeminent until they, in turn, were swept away by the Romans, the empire-building civilization who 2,000 years ago conquered most of the then-known world. Could any of these peoples be realistic candidates for the job of drafting and constructing Stonehenge? How can we decipher the available evidence to uncover who was really responsible? Stonehenge does not give up its secrets easily. But there are clues to be found, if you know where to look, deep under the stones. Early archaeologists found antler horns, pottery, and even human remains in the area. Modern radiocarbon dating offers new and more accurate dates to work with. Superseding less reliable tests of the past, scientists can now test artifacts like this antler horn to tell exactly how old it is. And because it was buried directly underneath the stones, it tells us the most likely date when Stonehenge was built. In tests published in 1995, scientists discover that some previous estimates had been wrong. The final phase of Stonehenge was older than they thought. It was built as far back as 4,000 years ago. It's been stunning news for archaeologists such as Mike Pitts.
The new radiocarbon dating of Stonehenge has had the biggest impact on our understanding of the monument since people first recognised it as something created by people many centuries ago.
It's the first hard evidence of a date, and it rules out the Druids as possible constructors, who only came to Britain around 2,000 years ago. In fact, it eliminates many of the usual suspects. The search for the builders of Stonehenge needs to travel much further back in time. It's certainly not a Roman building. It isn't the work of the late-coming Druids, nor of the waves of settlers from all over Europe. Carbon dating proves Stonehenge is far older than all those civilizations, with the first phase predating the Great Pyramids of Egypt. So the tests suggest that Stonehenge is the work of ancient Britons, a primitive and little-known people. It seems unbelievable. 4,500 years ago, Britain was nearing the end of the Stone Age and the start of the Bronze Age. Its people were subsistence farmers, technologically undeveloped, and just starting to understand how to work with metal. How could such primitive people have pulled off such an incredible construction feat? This was, by anyone's standards, a huge construction job. The first problem any ancient builders faced was getting hold of the construction materials, the stones that make up Stonehenge. And that was far from easy. There are two types of stones at Stonehenge. The smaller ones are called the blue stones, believed to have been hauled to the site before the larger sarsen stones. But once the sarsen ring had been erected, the builders seem to have had second thoughts. The smaller blue stones were repositioned over the years within it. No one knows why. And there is another puzzling question. Just where had all these stones come from? In one case, the answer is easy. Similar rocks to the large sarsen stones can be seen some 20 miles from Stonehenge. Using manpower to haul the rocks to the site would be tough, but not impossible. But the blue stones are a different matter. They're not from this area at all. In fact, even tracing their source isn't easy. The clues to where they originated can be found with the rock experts at the British Geological Survey. Here, in a vast collection, are rock samples from all over Britain, every one with its characteristic crystalline texture preserved as a microscope slide. And each specimen cross-referenced to the geological map of Britain. Is there a match between the rock type of the blue stones and a sample in the collection? And can that reveal the source of the stones anywhere in the British Isles? Under the microscope, the distinctive crystalline texture of the blue stones are a close match with samples already in the collection. They can even be traced to one specific location, the Preseli mountain range in southwest Wales. It's a clever piece of deductive science, but it poses as big a riddle as it solves. The Preseli Mountains are more than 200 miles away from Stonehenge. The journey begins in tough terrain, and then, just to make it tougher, involves crossing England's biggest tidal estuary. So how could stones weighing as much as 4 tons be carried such a long way with just the primitive technology of ancient Britons, some 4,500 years ago? Perhaps one answer is they never were carried. Perhaps ancient Britons just found the stones, already lying amongst Salisbury Plain, deposited there by a powerful force of nature. The movement of ice. It was not long after England's last ice age, when massive ice sheets spread down from the Arctic as far as southern England. Glaciers so powerful, they could easily sweep huge rocks across the landscape. Could such glaciers be responsible for shifting the blue stones? The answer may lie in the remote mountains of Wales. Local author and researcher Robin Heath is a man passionate about the mysteries of the Preseli Bluestones and ancient Britons.
I get excited about coming up here because these are my ancestors, and this is the culture of Britain.
Heath has been exploring here for the last 20 years, cataloguing peculiarities about the stones. Old artifacts provide the latest clues for our investigation. Many of the stones here at Preseli have giant stone wedges stuck between them. Someone, at some time, has tried to prise them away from the rock face. And there is even more compelling evidence that these rocks have been shaped and worked on.
There are some stones that show evidence of being cut to size. And there are other stone tools being found by several people that appear to have been used for dressing the stone somewhat before its journey.
Stone Age tools found nearby suggest that these rocks were being worked by men around the time that the Bluestones appeared at Stonehenge. But the most clear evidence that the glacier theory is unlikely can be found at Stonehenge itself. There are no other Bluestones to be found where the monument stands on the vast expanse of Salisbury Plain. And what sort of glacier would deposit only these few massive rocks and leave no other trace of its passage? The probable conclusion? It was our late Stone Age ancestors who transported those stones. Which begs the next question. How did they do it? We call a professional, an undoubted expert in managing massive-scale construction projects. Someone with a passion for both construction engineering and ancient archaeology. A qualified engineer with an interest in Stonehenge, Rick Smales.
I got interested in archaeology and ancient construction primarily based on my background in construction and my love of history. And I was always curious, like most folks are, well, how did they do that?
Modern American construction projects may be 4,000 years and an ocean away from Stonehenge. And the tools they use just couldn't be more different. But the basic principles bridge the centuries between them.
Well, the first thing that we would look at is the actual site itself. Now, in a normal construction project, when the project is finished, we have as-built drawings that identify everything that was put into the project. In the case of Stonehenge, we obviously don't have the drawings, but we have the actual structure itself.
Using Stonehenge's structure as a project blueprint, Smales works backwards to the basic steps required for such a construction task. Step 1. Get the construction materials to the building site. Step 2. Work out how to use those materials to create the structure. Step 3. Calculate how much labour all this involves. Using Smales' 3 steps, it may be possible to work out how Stonehenge was built. Our first step? Getting the materials. The 40-ton sarsen stones are relatively easy. They are believed to have been brought to Stonehenge from a site about 20 miles away. How did ancient Britons move such massive weights? A decade ago, a team of engineers tried to solve this problem. With the help of volunteers, a wooden sled, and a lot of grease, they moved a 40-ton rock a few hundred feet. A small distance compared to the 20 miles that the ancient Britons faced. Even trickier would have been getting those blue stones 240 miles from the place where they were quarried in the mountains of South Wales to Salisbury Plain. It's something Robin Heath has a theory about.
Well, as an engineer, you want to get the stones onto water quickly. In prehistoric times, if you could have got it down to the Cleddau River, 3 miles away, you've then got water most of the way to Stonehenge.
Could Stone Age people possibly have had the technology to carry these 4-ton rocks over water? And can a test be devised to see if such a feat was truly possible? A boat needs to be built, but what type? Archaeological evidence suggests that people from the Stonehenge era used a variety of different types of boats. The most common were log boats, a type of dugout canoe cut from an oak tree. Is it possible that these log boats could carry the sort of heavy stones required in the construction of Stonehenge? An unusual discovery at Shardlow Quarry in England's Midlands in 1998 offers evidence that they could. When a flood washed away the mud from what appeared to be an old tree stump, something unusual appeared. Where a river had once been, emerged the remains of an ancient Bronze Age logboat. Even more interestingly, the boat was carrying an unexpected payload, more than half a ton of quarried rock. So, a logboat seems the logical choice for this rock-carrying demonstration. And that would require a very large tree. Fortunately, some foresters are culling some older oak trees from a hardwood forest, perfect to make the logboat. Now there is a log, it needs to be sculpted into a boat. Ancient woodwork expert Damien Goodburn takes up this challenge.
What we're setting out to do here, to make a vessel that will carry the stones with the maximum buoyancy and reasonable stability, is to take a pair of dugout boats and link them together with a simple platform of poles, and then the stone will be something like that. So that's our aim. The practicalities of it may be quite difficult, but that's what we reckon should work.
With the right tools for the job and help from some friends, Goodburn thinks the boat can be ready in a fortnight.
Wind your fingers.
The team shows that the technology of the time would have worked. But completing the whole boat by hand is, while authentic, also time-consuming. To speed up the process, chainsaws are called in. The boat's construction is well underway. It's almost ready for its two greatest tests. Will it float? And can it carry a Stonehenge-sized stone? Assuming the boat floats, it now needs a very large rock. Because the Preseli Mountain is a protected national park, a boulder the same size and weight as the bluestones is blasted out from this granite quarry. A substantial crane lowers the massive weight onto a sled at the boatyard. The team suddenly realises what an immense task they've taken on. It's clearly going to be too much to balance such a load on one finished logboat. To make it work, another logboat built by Damien 14 years ago is standing by. If the team doesn't get the boat finished soon, they will miss the high tide, essential for launching the heavy weight of the boat. The plan is to lever the boat over oiled skids and slide and pivot it down to the water's edge. It's a nice idea in theory, but in practice it seems Goodburn may have underestimated the weight, not just of the stone, but of the boat.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Eventually, with some extra effort, the logboat begins to gather some momentum.
Keep pulling, that's it, stop. Right.
But not for long. The team is worried about the jetty not holding up under the 1-ton weight of the boat.
These are just fairly rotten 3x2s, and I'm not sure that's going to take a ton weight.
Never had this trouble in the Bronze Age.
Wasn't any sawn planking.
1, 2, 3. Are you pulling?
No, we were pushing on these ropes. That's why they. That's why they stayed straight.
Okay. Are you ready?
Brushing aside the problems with the precarious jetty, Goodburn decides that one last push should be enough to launch the boat, and instructs the chainsaw operator to get in and row.
Okay, hold the gun off.
Nice one.
It might not have been the most elegant of launches, but the logboat now safely floats in the water. The team doesn't have time to waste. They still need to launch the other boat and lash the two together. But one of them is sinking. Undeterred, the team presses on with lashing the boats together, which involves drilling holes in the side of the boat.
That's done.
With the boat securely tied, the task of getting the stone onto the boat begins in earnest.
Okay, you ready, people?
Yep.
1, 2, 3.
Worried that the stone might slide too quickly, Goodburn changes tactics.
Yeah, that's it.
So try a gentle push on 3, okay? 1, 2, 3. Nothing at all. Well, I think if you put a lever behind that big crosspiece.
With the lever in place, the stone begins its slow crawl down to the boats.
Yes, it's moving, yeah. Hang on a minute.
Next, the volunteers control the weight of the stone as it's placed on a bridge that will tilt it towards the boats.
Get a good grip with that pole. Okay, B-tree.
As they take the strain, Goodburn's plan is to have them slowly release the sled.
Okay, let go on that side a little. Relax slightly.
But then disaster strikes.
Let the boat out, trees. We need to pull this over now. Let this
Goodburn is too distracted to notice what has happened.
Okay.
But the stone is still slipping, and he hasn't realised that the sled is now stuck underneath the poles on which it was supposed to be resting.
We need to let the boats out now. We can't because they've got...
By the time they notice what has happened, the tide has started to turn against them, and a frantic rescue plan is devised.
Now, what we really want, if there's any chance on earth that you could pull uphill there, maybe...
The idea is to winch the sled up, reposition it, and then remove the bridge, all before the boat gets grounded.
Let's do it from the back. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Yes, and up. Hold it. Lean back. You can't pull if you're vertical. You've got to be...
The sled is now in the right place, but there is a much more pressing problem. The boats are dangerously close to sinking. They plug the leak with flax and lard, which should last at least a couple of hours. With the boat temporarily repaired, it's time to remove the bridge.
Can you pull it right out now, please? Gently, not too fast. Okay, you can just pull it clear, okay. Now what do we do?
Fortunately, someone comes up with a solution. And with one last use of the indispensable lever, the stone is levelled.
That's the one.
Got some leaking through that peg. Can you tap that in a bit more if I give you this? But only gently, okay?
But with the leak still threatening to sink the boat, it's time to get afloat and run the experiment.
Underneath. Just... I'll take a paddle off the front.
Could the combined technology of log boats and human power move a 4-ton stone across a tidal estuary? Or would the weight of the stone prove too much? We have proved beyond doubt that Britons in the period between the late Stone Age and the early Bronze Age could have moved blue stones from Wales to England to build Stonehenge. But this exercise was easy. It was made comparatively simple with the aid of modern tools to make just one boat, to move just one stone, a few hundred yards on calm waters. Our ancient cousins seemingly built boat after boat and moved stone after stone, hundreds of miles across open sea. The scale of investment of time, human effort and ingenuity is almost beyond comprehension, and this from a supposedly primitive people. Their job was not yet over.
1, 2, 3, whoa!
Once the stone arrived on the site, it still had to be raised. This is step 2 in Smale's guide to how to build Stonehenge. Back at the attempt 10 years ago, the team of engineers thought that this could be done most efficiently using a ramp to provide a pivot point. It seemed raising the large top stones or lintels was not beyond Bronze Age Britons either. All that was needed was a big wooden scaffold. Ancient Britons could have built Stonehenge. All they would have needed was a little engineering knowledge and some simple levers and ramps. Armed with all the data, can Smales calculate just how many man-hours of labour it would have taken to carry out all the work?
We're looking at probably a peak workforce of maybe 300 people, taking on the short end, the quickest it could be built, maybe 2.5, 3 years, and using in the order of 1.5 million to 3 million labor hours.
The work may have been spread out over generations, much like a medieval cathedral. But what could have possibly motivated them to undertake such a huge project? What is the relationship between architecture and the corresponding societies that create it? Dr. Ronald Smith is an expert. He explains.
As you look at these places, they're reflections of us. They're reflections of a culture, the reflections of emotions that we express. They are, in fact, a study of us.
Smith thinks that the way a building is built gives us information about the intentions of the people who built it. So analysing Stonehenge's size, structure and shape will help us understand why it was constructed. Smith explains his theory with a modern example, Las Vegas. Why, for example, are all the buildings so big?
Large in America is seen as good, is seen as beautiful. We are a country of large things, from buildings to cars. Everything large is good here.
An interesting theory. But then when you start to look around, you realise that people do interact with buildings and structures in an emotional way. So going back a few millennia, was there something about the size of the stones at Stonehenge that reflects why the monument was built?
The great appeal of Stonehenge, the size of these huge stones. It's a place to celebrate, a place to worship, a place to acknowledge something greater than what is human, something bigger than what we are, bigger than the tribe, bigger than the community.
It follows that the size of the stones then might have been designed to tower over the worshippers, reminding them of an omnipresent God, just like cathedrals through the ages. Stonehenge, as a religious site, is also a theory favoured by Mike Pitts.
They weren't accountants. Stonehenge was not a housing estate. It was a religious monument. Perhaps the mountain, the Preseli Hills, was a sacred mountain, and there was something about the rocks on it that, when they brought them to Salisbury Plain, allowed them to bring something of that magic into their own world. There are so many possible explanations, and whatever was going on, I think we can be pretty sure that there were many of these things happening.
All this new information starts to reveal that ancient Britons at the time of Stonehenge might not be the primitive people we once thought them to be. In the probe into the origins of Stonehenge, it's been established that its builders had solved difficult engineering problems and coordinated construction on a massive scale. Have the abilities of these ancient Britons been underestimated? Can we build a more complete picture of these people to reveal the truth about the builders of Stonehenge? In April 2003, construction workers unearthed human remains at Boscombe Down, just 3 miles from Stonehenge. Flint arrowheads found with the bodies earned them the nickname the Boscombe Bowmen. Could they offer evidence about the people who were alive when Stonehenge was built? Andrew Fitzpatrick is from Wessex Archaeology.
To start with, it didn't look all that special. It was only as the excavation was done that we realised there was something very unusual about the grave.
Skeletons have been uncovered near Stonehenge before, but until now they have been either foreign visitors or much later bodies buried many years after it was constructed. This new grave was quite different. So what does this excavation reveal? There are hundreds of bones, suggesting multiple burials, something not usually known from this period. Who were these individuals? Could their remains hold the key to unlocking the mystery of who built Stonehenge? The next clues about this unusual burial came from Jackie McKinley, a forensic pathology expert.
One of the first things I do when I get material like this into the laboratory is lay everything out. And with quite a lot of work, it was possible to work out that we had parts of 7 individuals.
Unfortunately, the condition of the bones means that a genetic test is out of the question. Is there another way of uncovering the relationship between the bodies? The breakthrough comes from a new test. It's capable of identifying the likely location where people were born by identifying chemical markers absorbed in the teeth. Could the forensic teeth test tell us if the bodies had come from the same place? The technique traces chemicals taken up by tooth enamel during childhood to reveal where someone was brought up. These traces come from the food we eat, the water we drink, and from the general environment. The teeth enamel is tested for 2 separate chemicals: levels of oxygen isotopes and the isotopic levels of the element strontium. Each reading is compared to a map of known levels of oxygen and strontium and reveal the locality that has left these chemical fingerprints in the teeth. It seems logical to think that the bodies dug up near Stonehenge might have originated in the local area. But the teeth tests reveal an unexpected result. The people buried thousands of years ago in this mass grave had all grown up in a location more than 200 miles away from Stonehenge. They had originated in South Wales, the location from where the Stonehenge bluestones had all been hauled. It's an incredible finding. Strong evidence that the men and the stones originated from the same place. And offers a tantalizing suggestion that these bodies were involved in transporting the stones from South Wales, and possibly in the very building of Stonehenge itself. But this quest is still not over. If these men built Stonehenge, is it possible to actually see what the builders of Stonehenge might have looked like? Taking the most complete skull, we conduct a unique experiment on a 4,300-year-old Stonehenge man. His bones are scanned into a computer, creating a 3-dimensional image of all the skull fragments. And the computer calculates just how to rearrange the pieces of bone into an anatomically correct order. Then it is up to the facial reconstruction team to try and assemble the jigsaw puzzle into a fully formed face. Here at the University of Manchester, experts use this new technique. Skilled facial anthropologists use advanced software to build layers of muscle. The system allows the operator to feel the contours of the skull, layer by layer, to create a 3-dimensional model. It takes many weeks of computer time, but finally, the mysterious and long-dead Welshman is ready to be revealed. We are about to become the first people for over 4,000 years to see the features of one of the men who may have built Stonehenge. The journey to uncover the builders of Stonehenge has ranged from England's Salisbury Plain to the mountains of Wales. We have seen how ancient Britons could have hauled vast slabs of rock miles across land and sailed them across water to construct the monument. Examination of ancient graves has offered a face, and shed new light on the origins of the peoples who might have come from far and wide to build Stonehenge.
What the new science is telling us is that people were moving about, not just within Britain, but clearly all over Europe. And that one, I think, imagines now that the construction of Stonehenge would have been known about at least all over southern Britain, and that this was almost part of the purpose of it for the people who built it. It was a statement about their power.
And yet we still remain with an enduring mystery, and many different theories as to why it was built. The only certainty remains: the stones themselves. A monument that has stood proud and immovable for thousands of years. An incredible monument to the incredible ingenuity of the human mind.